Without any further ado, I would like to invite here Cheryl Martin, a fantastic, well, can I call you a friend, Cheryl? Because a long time ago, we were both on the stage and we were talking how important it was to have female cybersecurity practitioners. So I'm very pleased. Yes, so a couple of years later, Cheryl is presenting at ISACA event, and just to introduce Cheryl's fantastic biography, she is a UK partner at EY responsible for leading the financial services information security and GDPR practice. So if you wanted someone who knows everything about financial services and absolutely every question answered in terms of the GDPR, Cheryl will be the person to do so. She has more than 25 years of experience in information security and risk, from leading global information security and data privacy, GDPR engagement across all sectors. I can go on for a very, very long time, but without any further ado, Cheryl, you have the microphone, or you have your own?
I have my own microphone. Okay. Could I have the clicker though? That will be lovely. Thank you. Well, thank you so much, and it is absolutely a delight to be here. So we will get to the slides in a minute, but for those of you who are living, breathing, sleeping, and have that nightmare of compliance around data, and we won't say the GDPR world, we know that 10 days is not necessarily the final countdown. I did a presentation a few weeks ago, and we named it just that, the final countdown, or is it? And I think the answer is it isn't the final countdown. So whilst the 25th of May is a bit of a watershed, and for some organisations there will be a little bit of a, oh, we got here. For others, it's just a continuum of what they needing to be doing for best practice and how they're working with best practice. So when we're out in the marketplace here and we're talking to organisations, we are looking particularly at that risk, and that risk of data and the risk of the issues that are there. So I just wanted to just ask, I've been today at a really fantastic event at the Royal Institute. So I had the pleasure of talking in the Faraday Lecture Hall this afternoon to 250 students. How many of you, when you have been building your privacy policy, have taken it out to your customers for their view? A couple of you? Brilliant. So that's great. The Royal Institute have been working with over 450 students since December to build their privacy policy, with a view to make it easy and understandable, and to have it embedded in their, actually on their website. And indeed today, the discussions that were going around were the final phases of that privacy policy and what was going to go online. And there were some fantastic discussions from those that were there. They were aged between 15 to 20. So very much in that digital snowflake age, which is a new term I learnt today, snowflakes. Okay, everyone equally individual, but they want to be considered to being one thing. So I'm learning something every time. So it was interesting to see from them, from their perspective, what was important to them. And they, of course, have never known anything apart from the digital age. For those of us who left school just last year, we do remember things when it wasn't digital. So, you know, we are dealing with a whole gambit across our clients of really different views as to what security is, what privacy is, and how they're willing to share, willingly or unknowingly, their own data. So as I was thinking about this evening and, you know, some of the things that we were looking at, underpinning everything that we have is the risk, whether it's realised, whether we don't know that something's happened, but it is that risk. And, you know, Ilana talked about the cyber risk, the breach notification, and the new rights that are there for us as data subjects. And those challenges, you know, it is a reality now. Our customers expect their data to be secured. Is it a big headline news sometimes when an organisation is hacked? No. How many of you moved, you know, if you were a TalkTalk client, how many of you moved from TalkTalk? A couple of you. How many of you have moved from things like TSB and areas like that? For us as customers now of some of these large organisations, we recognise that these things are going to happen. It's how the organisations deal with it and what they are doing to communicate. And that's really some of the things which is we see with GDPR and some of the work that we're doing. We really recognise that it's the importance of that communication. You know, we all don't want to be a Dido there in front of the Commons Select Committee, not knowing where that data was and whether we had deleted it or not deleted and which server was it on. So, you know, GDPR is actually really just leading practice. A lot of the things, a lot of the requirements, a lot of the rights that are embedded into the GDPR is the same as we had as data protection. You know, looking at data deletion, looking at data deletion policies are all things that we should have been doing under the Data Protection Act. And for some organisations, they simply didn't. So we've talked about headline news, the sophistication of those attacks, the looking at, you know, something that may come in a multiple way into your organisation. Every quarter we run in the financial services sector what we call our risk radar. This is the output from the risk radar actually in March. And this is where we take the threats that have been seen in the financial services sector and we validate it with a number of leading organisations from banking, from insurance, from wealth and asset managers. And you'll see for all of them, you know, right here, right in the centre, the biggest concern in the UK at the moment is still the general data protection regulation and the challenges that that brings from a regulatory perspective and a regulatory landscape. Recognising that the failure of not doing it right means a potential for a huge fine, but more importantly, a potential for being a scalp that could be on the radar of the regulators. Question I get asked quite a lot of time by a number of organisations is, do we think that the regulatory environment is going to change as a result of GDPR? And the answer has to be, it's going to have to, because our ICO is now one of 28 organisations and 28 regulators that can actually apply that maximum penalty of 4%. So there will be changes, there will be more scrutiny. And certainly there'll be a view from us as data subjects to ensure that our information is being held in the right way. We certainly want to understand how organisations are planning to secure it and what are they going to do with all of that information that they have. Again, you'll see one of the other areas which was key and critical to the finance organisation was the Cambridge Analytica, and to understand how the spiral out from that, from the information that had been used or abused, depending on which way you want to look at it. So again, very, very key and critical for a lot of the finance organisations to look at those lessons learned. For those of you who have touched into EY at all in the past, you'll know that every year we do a global information security survey. We're actually just announcing this year's survey. Last year we had 1,735 global organisations that participated in the survey. It's very interesting to see that those of us who are ISACA members will know for a number of years we have always said that one of the biggest threats is that of insiders. Out of the 1,735 organisations last year who were surveyed, 77% of them said that their employees were still going to be the most likely vector of attack. That's the same message that we have been giving as security practitioners for a long period of time. It's also the message that when you start to look at GDPR and the impacts to how data is being used, making sure you have that training and awareness program for your staff, for your individuals, is so key and critical. Interesting as well, as organisations were saying, 17% said that they didn't believe that they could detect a sophisticated attack. Some of the attacks that we are seeing are not necessarily very sophisticated, but it does lead us to believe that there may well be some vulnerabilities in organisations that have gone undetected for a long period of time. Our forensic investigation department spend a lot of time working when a breach has occurred. Currently, the longest period of time that they found that an organisation has received a breach is 9 years. That stopped a lot of people of you. Oh my God, they've said 9 years. I've just seen forks poised mid in the air. So 9 years someone has been in an organisation exfiltrating information, and using that information for their gain. So we can start to see that the 72-hour breach notification becomes a really difficult issue to actually put into place. Recognising it's 72 hours from when we know that breach has occurred, but it's still challenging nonetheless if something has gone undetected from a long period of time. So what does it mean for GDPR? And I apologise if you can't read this little bit of an eye chart, but this is our GDPR on the page. We took the articles from GDPR and we mapped them to 14 capability areas. When we start working with organisations, big or small, I've been working with a number of charities. Another hat that I wear is our corporate social responsibility partner. And we've been doing some pro bono work with a number of charities. We still use these 14 capabilities. They allow us to look at the GDPR issues. They allow us to make sure that the management and therefore the security, the governance and the ongoing compliance, the integration of GDPR across all of the sectors and all of the parts of the organisation are in place, and then assessing the mapping, the inventory, where data is held and how it's secured. So we use this and we've mapped this, as I say, to all the articles, and we have worked with a number of organisations. Where do we see the biggest issues? What are the things that we're still finding that, 10 days to go and the clock is ticking? For a number of organisations, they still don't know, big or small, exactly where data is or how it's held in a structured or an unstructured format. And I know that Nick and Mike are going to talk a little bit more about that later on, so you'll start to see. But the biggest impact is if I don't know where it is, how can I secure it? And if I can't secure it, how can I control it? If I have one of those pesky data subjects that decides they want to invoke their rights on the 26th of May to say what information am I holding about them and exactly where does it go and what do you use, for a number of our organisations and a number of our industries across the UK and indeed across Europe, we know that for some it's going to be a big challenge. Luckily for them, they've got 30 days to turn around that response. I could argue that they're a complex organisation and they might have 45. I don't think the ICO is going to wear that. So you can start to see things that organisations should have just put in place as a matter of course are areas where they haven't done. So another question that we often get asked as we're out in the marketplace is, do we believe that the claims management companies are going to start to change from, have you lost PPI? Do you think you've got data at risk? Yes, absolutely. There's going to be some medal makers without shadow of a doubt on the 26th of May. How big or small that's going to be will depend on the sort of organisation that you are. We know from certain organisations that we've been working with that for some they are gearing up to a 600 to a 700-fold increase on data subject access requests. They believe that there will just be people out there who will send out multiple requests to say, what do you hold about me and why are you holding it? Making sure that your staff, whether you are big or small, understands the impacts of what GDPR means to them is vitally important, and having that education and awareness programme isn't just an activity that should be done by the 25th of May. This is something which is ongoing, because GDPR requires you to continue to certify. Nothing new for those of us who are core cybersecurity experts that have been advocating and extolling the likes of ISO 27001 and PCI DSS. We're really used to that. But many of the parts of our organisations that we're working with are not used to that 3-yearly cycle of an external auditor coming in or even an annual audit. So there are lots of things and lots of changes that need to go across the whole of the organisation. What is the impact? Well, quite significant if we get it wrong. Maximum fines up to 4% of global turnover, or 20 million euros or 17 million pounds. That is a significant increase on what the ICO currently can fine. Up to the 25th of May, or the 24th of May, midnight, it's £500,000. Click over to the 25th of May when GDPR becomes in force, it will be 4% of global turnover or £17 million. Estimates, it's in really small writing, but estimates on this that if the fines were applied in 2016, it would have been £69 million. That is before Equifax. That is before some of the instances with Uber. That is before the Deloitte instances have come out. That is certainly before Cambridge Analytica and Facebook. So you can start to see how the fines could start to increase. And the ICO is one of 28, as I said earlier. Why will they be seen to be lenient? Well, we know that the French and the German organisations will come at this and they'll use this in the same way as they have done all of the time. So, quite a significant issue. The impact, of course, on organisations, there's that reputational harm. But think about some of you who are smaller businesses. You actually form part of a supply chain. And being non-compliant in that supply chain, you're being that breach, you could become liable along with the larger organisations of which you participate. And understanding how data flows from you to a much larger organisation is vitally important, but also recognising your contractual terms with them. So we saw 72 hours. Many people are saying those 72 hours actually being reduced to 24 in new contracts as they come out. So we are now expecting you to tell us if you have a breach within 24 hours. Quite difficult. We've just seen 9 years on the extreme scale. We've seen organisations who know that they've had breaches over the last 6 months, recognising that they wouldn't have been able to inform all of their third parties or indeed all of those shareholders who were affected within the 72-hour breach notification. So if you haven't tried it, I would suggest between now and the 25th of May, you look at pretending this is a Friday afternoon before a bank holiday. What a surprise, that's when GDPR comes in. And looking at seeing what happens at 5 o'clock on a Friday afternoon with your organisation and with your suppliers. Because those are the sorts of things you are going to need to make sure that you and the rest of your staff can actually articulate if there should be an occurrence. So, post-May, the next steps. Business as usual. We have been with a number of organisations. I spent the last 2 years, both here in the UK and out in EMEA, with organisations of different sizes. I've been into organisations that have said, I was just saying to Mike earlier, I walked into one about 6 months ago. They said, we're 170 years old and we've got 170 years worth of data. I went, well, you might just have 170 years worth of problems. But you can see those issues. People have hoarded data. Even though the Data Protection Act says the same things, we should have only been keeping that information for the length of time that we need it as data protection under the DPA of 1998. So we should be seeing this in our business as usual. We should be seeing this as our normal governance and best practice as to how we run the business. It shouldn't necessarily be that big issue. Although for many organisations, the term which I loved when I walked into a board about 4 months ago, who said, we have determined our risk position is we are flopping over the line on the 25th of May, and then we will continue to remediate. I went, okay, has that gone up formally to the risk committee? We were removed, flopped. We said we are going to be minimally compliant. I thought flopped probably wouldn't have flown it with the CEO, but never mind. So you can see for some organisations, they still will not be ready, even though they had 2 years notification that this was coming in, and it's coming in the 25th of May this year. Most would like it to come in another 12 months' time. There are many that have got long-tail remediation programmes, which will take them anything between 24 and 36 months. And then they're building on top of it things like, digital and digital data. So having completely and utterly scared you with all of those issues, any questions?
We'll probably have a couple of minutes for maybe 1 or 2 questions, which we can follow up with the panel discussion. Try not to overlook the entire audience.
No, you see, they're all completely scared.
It's not a question as such, but just saying that the DPAs are not ready yet. Only 4
yep.
of them are ready.
Yep, and
So
that's a
no
good
panic.
point. Sorry, I forgot to mention that. Yes, you know, we still don't know what privacy certification means. We still don't know all of the areas, and yet we've got a regulation coming in 10 days. So incredibly hard to continue to look at that compliance in something which is changing. But that's really nothing new. And we're quite used to, certainly as cyber professionals, we're quite used to that threat changing all of the time. And we're used to having to look at that compliance landscape shifting from one day where a threat is seen as being nothing to us as organisations to being a real issue. So I agree with you. Yes, still looking for some of that clarification from Europe and from others. There were some lovely organisations that said, well, we're going to be moving out of London because of Brexit. Well, it doesn't matter. You've still got European citizens' data. So, yes, some organisations have tried every which way to get out of it. But it's a good point, well made. Dallin.
Cheryl, I'm feeling really sorry for the ICO. How
Why?
on earth will they cope? And is this actually a major job opportunity?
Yes, I think anyone who's got privacy or has been doing anything with privacy, do brush up your CV, because 35,000 jobs are still not filled within the privacy organisations across EMEA. But we shouldn't feel sorry for the ICO because they have now roped in the other regulatory bodies. So if you are regulated somewhere along the line, the other regulatory bodies will be coming out as part of the ICO army, and the ICO will come alongside. So you'll be expecting, if you are regulated under the PRA or the FCA in the finance services industry, expect to see them coming out, and they'll be asking to look at and see what your plans are. For those of you who have looked at the FCA annual report, you will also notice it's great bedtime reading if you are an insomniac and you cannot sleep. All 98 pages will send you to sleep very quickly. But in there, cyber resiliency and GDPR is up there right at the forefront. So no surprise that the rest of the regulatory bodies are all following suit. If you are not a regulated body, you still have the issue that the ICO may come along and ask you those questions. But more importantly, it's likely to be those data subjects who ask you the questions, and it could well be then the organisation is out in social media or Twitter and you've got adverse press. So, you know, I don't think any of us, any organisation, large or small, are going to be out of the hairs of someone somewhere along the line. But great question, thank you.
We might have maybe one more, if that's okay.
Thanks, Cheryl. Good question for you. You did say that obviously employees are one of the biggest risks from data breaches, and it's a good reason why, in terms of vulnerabilities, that's not disclosed to your wider workforce. Now knowing that you have 72 hours to respond, it's over a weekend, I would see that this is a great opportunity for a disgruntled employee, perhaps, to do something maliciously on Saturday. On the Saturday. Are companies taking special precautions? Is that on companies' radar to be ready for that, and maybe have heightened sense of, you know, maybe additional staff on board or something for that first weekend? Because no one wants to be first in the headlines in terms of a GDPR breach.
And you're right, and of course it's a bank holiday weekend, so for us, certainly in the UK, we'll all be out on our deck chairs. I'm sure it's not going to be as warm as it was last time, but it's a really good point. There are some that have put those contingency plans in place, not only just for malicious employees, they're also thinking that the cyber criminals are seeing this as a great opportunity for the weekend when GDPR goes live across 28 member countries in the European Union, that they may well start to look at that. So yes, we are seeing that as being an issue. Those of us who are the security experts amongst our organisations will go, well, of course, we've got that contingency plan for, that was in our risk planning. Yeah. But it doesn't always translate across the rest of the organisation. So that's a great point. And it's just, yeah, it's typical, isn't it? It's a bank holiday weekend where everyone's going to be, you know, defences are down.